Lost in the stacks with the eccentric bookman.
Ah, hello, friends. Nice to see that you've come back to have yet another discussion with your old friend, the eccentric bookman. I hope that the librarian didn't give you too much of a hard time as you made your way through the stacks. Well, with that being said, let's get to it, shall we? Allow me to be your guide into a world of wonder and mystery. It'll be perfectly fine. You're always safe as long as you remember one thing. It's only a story. So let's get to it, because I'd like to talk to you about a very specific story tonight by Mr. Clive Barker from the Book of Blood. In order to commemorate the new release from Vestron, Candyman 3 Day of the Dead, I'd like to talk to you about the story that started it all, The Forbidden. And this is by Clive Barker, as I said, and Clive has a very interesting way of writing stories, a very ghoulishly a way of making them ghoulishly enjoyable. And as I said, this is a horror anthology, so there is more than one story on this in this book. I believe I already told you it's from Volume 5 of the Book of Blood, if I'm right, and each story is good in its own way, but I'd like to talk to you specifically tonight about the Forbidden. So with that being said, let's get right to it. The story follows Helen Buchanan. I know what you're thinking. In the movie, her name was Helen Lyle, but it was changed in the movie for some reason. I don't know why. And in the movie, Helen is investigating the urban myth of the Candyman, but in the story, she is actually investigating and writing her thesis on graffiti artwork around the Cabrini Green area. And it's this investigation that will lead Helen to learn of the gruesome urban legend known as the Candyman that haunts Cabrini Green and its residents. She stumbles onto the myth when she finds an abandoned unit that is vacant and is in the walls in one of the rooms is riddled with artwork that depicts a character that Helen would come to know as the Candyman eventually. She hears many stories around Cabrini Green of things the Candyman has done. One woman who seems to be willing to talk to Helen tells her a bone-chilling story of a man who was butchered in the unit next to hers by a man with a hook for a hand. And Helen tells her friends and her husband Trevor about it. And as she's having dinner with one of her colleagues named Purcell, and Purcell in the movies is accompanied by another man. In the books, it is expanded in the story The Forbidden that they are in a relationship, and Purcell's friend is, for lack thereof a better term, more flamboyant. But there is no judgment here in the stacks. I only pointed out as it is a difference, and it was kind of an interesting element, I thought, to the story. I did not know that. I did not figure that out in the movie the first time I saw it, but it was an interesting element. And Purcell tells Helen that basically it's all just hearsay because nobody has any first-hand knowledge of the Candyman. It's all just third party, like it happened to a friend of a friend of a friend. So Helen makes a wager with Purcell, stating that if she can find somebody that has first-hand knowledge of the Candyman, or then she would treat Purcell to dinner, and if he, sorry, Purcell would treat her and her husband to dinner, and if she couldn't, she would treat them to dinner. So she goes back to Cabrini to investigate the Candyman myth further. But the woman who talked to her before starts recanting her story and becomes more tight-lipped, and tells Helen that if she told her anything, then she must have been lying. Helen would find out the gruesome truth when she comes face to face with the Candyman. And I want to point this out now. A lot of the stuff from the movies, like about Daniel Robitaille and all that, is just from the movies. In the book, The Forbidden, in the story, the Candyman, by Helen's own description, is depicted as a Caucasian male with pasty white yellowish skin and a sweet smell emanating from him. And he seduces he seduces Helen slowly toward death. And after sharing a kiss with her, Helen wakes up on the floor of the unit. One of the things I forgot to mention before, when Helen went to the unit to find the Candyman, she discovers the body of the young boy who was the son of the woman who was talking to her, and finds out that's the reason that the Candyman had brutally murdered the woman's son, and that's why she had become more tight-lipped. After waking up, she goes home and becomes more and more absorbed by the myth, realizing that she feels her life is empty because her husband is having an affair with with Bernadette, who is her best friend in the movie. So Helen goes back to Cabrini to attend the funeral procession for the boy that was murdered, but becomes involved in following the residents of Cabrini Green, as she finds out that the residents cover up and protect the Candyman for some reason, and the boy's body was taken from the funeral procession and thrown on a large bonfire. Whereas in the movie, it was depicted that the Candyman took an infant child. It is different in the book, because in the book it's not an infant child; it is a young boy, which is still equally as disturbing, especially since the boy was gruesomely murdered in the story. And in the end, Helen burns to death with the Candyman in the large bonfire. But unlike the movie, she does not fight or struggle. She just merely accepts her fate as the flames engulf her. Before she burns up, she sees Trevor, who had come down to Cabrini to look for her, actually being surprised that he would care enough to come to look for her, wondering if he would even miss her, or wondering, with this revelation, Helen accepts her fate and does not struggle or fight, as I said, against the Candyman, but instead burns to death, wrapped up in his arms. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little discussion, friends. I know I didn't cover everything in the story, but as I always say, this is just my little way of giving you a little taste of the story, and maybe you'll be inspired to go out and pick it up yourself. Maybe from the library, or maybe from another source. Just one more thing. I'm sure I told you that that this was to commemorate the Vestron release of the movie Candyman 3 Day of the Dead. And I'm sure if he hasn't already, an old friend of the Bookman will be stopping by in a red room to discuss it with you soon enough. And I'll leave the movie reviews to him as I cover the books. Have a safe trip tonight, friends, on your way home from the library, and do yourself a favor and please refrain from saying his name into the mirror 5 times.